Hi, and welcome once again to this week's installment of Leadership A to Z. We are not quite halfway through. We're on the letter L this week, almost halfway through, which is hard to believe. L is for loyalty. And this one is going to be, I think, a slightly longer video than the others have been because I need to unpack this on multiple levels. So let's start at the top level, which is loyalty to the organization for which you are working. This means that even if you disagree with some of the things they do, even if you don't necessarily like sometimes how they handle things, you don't say so in public. Obviously, family and friends, that's a safe place to discuss and vent, but you don't say things on social media, you don't write bad reviews even anonymously, you just don't do that. As long as you are employed by that organization, you have to represent them to the best of your ability, whether or not you disagree with them. And if you do truly disagree with them or the things they are doing, then it is probably time to look for another job. So loyalty to the organization. The next level down is loyalty to senior leadership and to your immediate management. This means that when they are proposing or instituting a new practice, a new initiative, perhaps there's a merger and acquisition going on, whatever it might be, when you discuss it with your team and your peers, you support it, even if you don't necessarily agree with it either all or in part. That can be really hard to do, and it's really important. And I'll talk about that further in a second, because I also want to make the point that this does not mean that you don't talk to your management about it and ask constructive questions. Not stamp your feet and say you disagree with it, but why are we doing this? What is the outcome that is desired from this? What's the purpose? Where is it going to go ultimately, and how might we do it maybe differently? How can you come up with better ways to do it? All of that is fine. That is not being loyal. But when you handle it with your peers and with your team, certainly with your team, you need to remember, and now we're going into a slightly lower level on this, that you are not just their manager and leader. You're also what's called a thought leader, which means that they look up to you in terms of how they are going to be guided to think about what is happening within the organization and to respond, whether they support it or not. And the reality is that if senior leadership has decided they're going to do something, whether you agree with it or not, you kind of have to support it. That's your job. And that is being loyal, again, to your management, senior leadership. If you really disagree with it, like I said a minute ago, it might be time to look for something else. Or it could be that you just need some time yourself. Change is tough. You might just need some time yourself to kind of get used to the idea and process it and move forward with it. Okay. The next level lower on in the loyalty hierarchy here is loyalty to your team and to the individuals on your team. This means you don't talk about people behind their back, even with care with your peers if something is going on, but you always make the point that you will support the individual and work with them if somebody brings an issue to your notice. You will also not talk about or allow your team to talk about each other behind each other's backs. That's kind of a weird construction, but you get what I mean. Again, I'm not saying you let anybody get away with anything. I'm not saying you let people or you discourage people from coming to you to report bad behavior. You don't want to do that. You want to make sure that people do report any kind of issues of harassment or bullying or whatever it might be, dishonesty. But you still need to handle that individually with that person behind closed doors. You don't give feedback, even if you're really angry about something or really upset about something, you don't give feedback in a crowd. So that's loyalty to your team. Of course, it also means supporting the good things that they're doing and making sure that that's known, that you do talk about. You can talk about good stuff behind people's backs. and not clearly, I hope, again, I don't need to say this, clearly not ever taking credit for something that somebody else does. Okay, the last point I want to make about loyalty, and I've called this a hierarchy, but it really is not necessarily a hierarchy except in sort of scale, and that is loyalty to yourself. And I've kind of touched on this a few times when I've said that if you really find yourself struggling in supporting the company as a whole because of something it's doing that you don't agree with or whatever that might be, or the culture is not a fit for you, and where I've talked about specific initiatives that I have urged you to support in the name of loyalty, but if they really aren't a fit for you, I've said a couple times, maybe it's time to find a new job somewhere else, a new opportunity. So loyalty to yourself means recognizing when a role, a requirement, a company culture is not good for you. All the way from it's downright toxic on up to there isn't an opportunity for the kind of work you want to do and the kind of advancement, career opportunities that you want. My experience through many years in corporate myself and many years now of doing consulting and executive coaching is that people tend to stay in jobs about 3 years, and I do mean 3 years, longer than they really should. So this final point about loyalty is to take a look at where you're at and make sure that it is a fit for you and that you are getting the opportunities that you want, and that you're doing the kind of work that makes you eager or at least interested in going to work every day. So a longer video today than usual because it is a bigger concept, and I think you can see that it's a very important concept from a leadership perspective. So that is L for loyalty, and I'll see you next week.